direction, and even punishing them when they show the rudiments of those traits. Now, I'm not the first person to say any of this. And one person that I'd like to point you to is Sir Ken Robinson. I'm sure many of you have heard the name. He's done a series of excellent talks that go into some of the details of how this works. And he puts this up a lot better than I do. For now, I'd like to give you a glimpse of what all of this means through the lens of my own experience. When I was doing, I did a master's of education at Penn. And while I was doing that, I was student taught at Northeast High School, George Washington High School. These are both sort of upper 50% Philadelphia public schools. And from day one of the things I found was that I was constantly drawn to the students who were chronically disruptive, late, inattentive in class. And initially that was because I figured that they were the ones who needed the help. And I was certainly true on that point. What I was wrong about was what they needed help with. Because it wasn't learning. Those kids were among the smartest in the room, almost without exception. And it wasn't motivation. It wasn't motivation. Because they never sat still. They were always doing something. It just wasn't what the class was ostensibly supposed to be about. And it certainly had nothing to do with sitting down and shutting up in a class that had no obvious impact on their lives. And that was the problem. The problem was that they came to school, every single one of them, with desire and skills and energy, and spent every day being told that none of it was worthwhile or wanted or would get them anywhere. Now, of course, most of us in that situation wouldn't act out. Most of us would either acquiesce or simply withdraw and possibly get depressed. But these kids don't. They keep pushing against all of that institutional weight. And instead of gratifying and channeling their energies, we brand them as failures. And we have the nerve to say that we want our students to become resilient, motivated, creative, and entrepreneurial. Now, I can already hear some of the objections. One of them is that kids need to learn discipline and respect, which is of course true. And the other is that they need to learn the basics. Whatever those are. Typically people refer to the 3 R's, right? Reading, writing, movement. Well, let's talk discipline and respect. Discipline and respect exist when each party is freely choosing to share goals and to have a stake in the other's outcomes. That's not a classroom. A classroom is inherently top-down. And accepting a one-way, top-down relationship isn't discipline or respect. It's submission. Now, in what constitutes the basics, there's quite a lot to be said on that, and I hope we can talk about that in our discussion afterwards. For now, I'm just going to leave you with one more story from my student teaching days. One of the chronically inattentive students that I was interested in had 2 so-called problem behaviors: cheating and drawing beautiful art, instead of paying attention to his biology lessons. In other words, when he was supposed to be competitive, he was trying to be collaborative. And instead of uncritically absorbing esoteric information like the composition of a phospholipid bilayer from a teacher who was in no sense an authority on the subject, he was exercising his creativity. So, why are our schools failing? Are our failures possible to address with things like funding changes, school choice, shakedown of management and unions, standards like Common Core? I don't think so. I think it's structural. I think it's because our students are supposed to hear and talk about stuff instead of doing stuff. If we want creative and technically competent talent, and if we want them to be motivated and resilient, we need our schools structurally to be places where students find niches, get creative, do stuff for real, fail, and then figure out with their peers what to do next. And F needs to be the beginning of inquiry, not the end of the student's hopes. Our school districts need to stop positioning themselves as the alpha and omega of everything there is to know. And our schools need to start operating in ways that express our values, not act against them. Now, in the interest of moving from talking to doing, I'm going to close by giving you some idea of how I and a few others think a solution could work. Peter Bergson and I are working with a Philly nonprofit called the Federation of Neighborhood Centers. And we're working on basically putting these ideas and this ethos to work in Philly for Philly school kids. And I'm just going to sort of sketch out a few quick attributes of what it is we're trying to do. One is real work. So no classrooms. There's going to be instead a mechanics garage, a performing arts space, a daycare center, and a farm, which actually is already up and running under the aegis of the Teens for Good program. So I urge you to check that out on the Federation Neighborhood Center's website. This is a place where Philly school kids, who may or may not be doing well in school, show up. They come from neighborhoods where good food may or may not be easy to find. And they work on a farm. They have accountability to each other and to a greater goal, which is of immediate relevance. They have to learn a thing or two about biology. They sell the food in the community, so they have to learn about accounting and marketing and communications and so on. And everything's bottom up. The kids will be able to shape their environment, which is going to teach them resilience. It's another way we're going to teach accountability. Money that comes in either through performing services for the community or through private donations is going to be to some extent usable by the students to shape what they can do. And on that note, we're going to end up having a lot of partnerships as well with local businesses, because we're going to need their help to give our students access to expertise in markets and to help facilitate what we hope is an extensive sharing of stakes between the learning center and the community, because that's the only way this will work. Everything has to be real and contextualized. And those partnerships are going to include high-powered individuals at certain institutions of higher learning in Philly, which will of course give our more academically minded students access to materials that may gratify their endeavors, and hopefully provide access to a college education from a non-traditional environment. But what's most important, and what I hope I can leave all of you with, is the question mark, which is why I've kept this one up the entire time. We cannot afford to get this wrong. Whatever form the solution to our public education issues takes, we can hold nothing sacred. Everything has to be open to questioning, even something as basic as the classroom. Thank you very much. No, you don't have to applaud, it's fine. This is Peter Bergson, by the way. Like I said, I hope that he can share with you more details about what Open Connections does and about what we're hoping to do in Philly. Shall we go around the room, do like a little ice-breaking introduction?